Okay, working on another scene that I did a stamp sketch of sometime in the past. I don't remember what it was for, if it was for Stampscapes University or whatnot. But here we are with the Eerie Moon and the Oak Row. Just two stamps, but the Oak Row has been stamped 1, 2, 3 times, okay? There's kind of 2 rows of it, so it looks like 6 rows, but I have layered it to create an entire, I wouldn't say forest, it's kind of more of like a hillside or whatnot. It's kind of like oak trees in the chaparral. And I thought we'd finish it off. I thought I'd try this right here. It's one of those chamois, kitchen chamois. It's not like a leather one, but it's just one of those cloth ones. And I thought we'd try that out. I've been contemplating the use of like a rag, like a t-shirt, old t-shirt or something like that lately, as far as the ink application process goes. And in theory, I don't know, you know, when you're talking about an absorbent and soft material, okay, one that not only absorbs, but will also, I don't know what, expel or transfer to what you're working on, should be fine. And, you know, what is that type of thing? It's fabrics, sponges of all sorts. I mean, that's what the color box stylus tool is, right? It's a sponge. So, things like paper towels work great. I've never used a napkin before. Some napkins, you know, might be a little bit harsh, though. I want something that's a little bit softer. You know, unless I have no choice, then I'll try it out. But, you know, as long as I have something kind of soft around, I was thinking that should work. So, I don't know, working okay. This is some Caribbean blue, and I was thinking about doing a kind of a glowing moonlit nightscape, I guess you can call it, in the trees. But I was thinking about doing some light beams in here, so I need to be careful not to take it too dark. I'm kind of running some of this color over the top of that moon just so it's not so stark white. Sometimes it, I don't know, I don't like it so stark white. I want the moon to be a little bit more kind of atmospheric, you know, having some haze or something in front of it, like a cloud or whatnot. So you don't actually have to stamp out a physical cloud, you know, just by the very nature of you applying something over the front of it. It's dampening it, so it's saying that there's some, you know, suspended moisture in the air, like a cloud or something of that sort. Okay, now what I'm doing right here is I'm kind of oscillating things a little bit. See how I have a little bit of that blue right here? Well, let's go a little bit more. Now, I always talk about this in all of my, I don't know, seemingly all of my lessons, whether they're about this subject matter or not, but we're talking about the oscillation of light and dark. It goes kind of, you know, there's some ink up here. I wouldn't say it's dark, but it goes ink, no ink. I don't know, there's ink here, but it's in the trees. But it kind of oscillates between light and dark, so let's do it like this. Let's go dark, light, dark, you know, with the trees, light underneath the trees, dark trees, lighter in here, and then I put this streak of color across here. So it goes dark, light, dark. All right, so if you just observe, you know, and I hadn't really thought about this until the last scene that I did, but when I'm applying ink, okay, I'm looking at that ink as it applies, but what I'm also doing, I don't know what percentile of attention I'm giving to the light, but see this light in here and the light on the moon. When I'm applying this ink, I'm kind of looking at the light maybe as much or more than the ink that I'm applying to it. So when I'm applying this ink right here, okay, I'm kind of looking to see what it's doing to affect that moon, okay? So the darker you make things, okay, now I'm applying a very light, what is this, yellow-green here, okay? But I'm looking to see it, how I'm looking at that moon more so than the color that I'm applying. I'm looking at a little bit of both. I mean, don't go 100% in one direction. But do observe your lighting in there, okay? And when your attention is kind of on equal parts of application and the negative space, that's the space that you're retaining around your application of media. That's the negative space. So it really gives you kind of a stronger hold on, or perspective on your lighting. You're seeing, your lighting scheme that you're developing in here, okay? A lot of people lose that light in there, okay? So by the time they get to the third or fourth color, they've kind of eradicated things because I think they're concentrating only on the medium. They're not concentrating on the retention of the light, okay? So really focus in on that lighting in there that you are working around, and that will give you a better kind of a, I wouldn't say a stranglehold, but it'll give you a good sense of where your lighting is, because it changes. The darker and more ink that you apply, the light changes by contrast, okay? The darker you make certain areas, the lighter your light areas are going to seem, okay? Alright, let's see. This rag is working pretty good. It's not fantastic, but I don't know. I don't really have any complaints about it at all. It seems a little bit more absorbent than what I'd want. The chamois is probably designed to kind of soak up moisture more so than kind of it releasing it, with these applications. But it looks pretty good, though, I think. Like a sponge, you can wring it out more, With this one right here, I feel like it's, it really wants to kind of grab and hold on to that liquid. But let's keep developing it and see. The wetter I make this, too, the more moisture it will release, because it'll start to achieve kind of more of a super saturation. All right, this is called light green. It's a very bright green. It'll give me a little bit more intensity. See, it's looking different. It looks different with each color that you apply. Remember, with dye-based inks, if you apply a light color over the top of a darker color, these are transparent colors, so it's not going to make something that's dark lighter, okay, by putting a light color over the top of it. Okay, there's transparent colors as opposed to opaque. Okay, that color felt better, though, because of that super saturation aspect of it. All right, let's move into, let's go to this blue right here, okay? Now, by using a light color over a dark color, it's not going to get lighter. And by using blue over green, it's not going to look blue, because blue is just a component of green, and the green from underneath is going to show through, so it doesn't look like that color of blue, at all. It just looks like a darker green. So that being said, you can really utilize a lot of your existing pad colors to achieve different hues. Okay, so if you lay down some greens, some yellow greens or whatever, or yellow, if you put blues over the top of it, you will achieve a blue looking hue because of that mixture. So if you know just some of the basics of color, you don't need to know too much, okay? We're not talking about triadic color combinations or something like that. The color wheel. We're just talking about yellow and blue make green, green and blue make kind of a bluer green, right? Yellows and reds make oranges, and the reds and blues will make violets. In this case, with dye-based inks, it's more of the pink and blue will make violets. Okay, so that being said, if you don't have a really dark green, this one's not super dark, but like this one right here is called bottle green. You're probably looks practically black, you know, on this video here, but it is green. But let's say you don't have a really dark bottle green, but you have a navy, then all you have to do is use your navy over the top of that green, and it'll look kind of like bottle green, you know, this really dark green. Okay. This bottle green pad, I think it's really juicy. Sometimes, a lot of times, a lot of my darker colors, I don't use them too much. You know, except for black, you know, to stamp out my images with. But if I ink them up, they can stay juicy for a really long time. Sometimes I probably don't re-ink them, some of my pads for, I don't know, maybe a year. I'm using Marvy right here. You can use Distress, Memento, Stampin' Up, whatever you have. But what I'm doing is I'm working kind of through a range of tones, okay? Okay, now sometimes I have to do this tapping to apply more ink, because if I wipe, it's like I'm kind of wiping ink off of the cardstock. Okay, I'm going for a little bit more of a stronger vignette around the composition here to frame things off. Remember how I say when you apply these inks, it changes the light areas of your scene by contrast. So the darker you take your darks, the lighter the lights are going to seem. By contrast, you really stand out, don't they? Which, you know, doesn't mean they have to stand out a lot. I plan on doing something with white pigment ink in here, so I don't want to I want to retain a lot of that white of the cardstock, because that represents that color of lighting. If I tone this out a little bit more, it would have a different feel to it, and I kind of feel inclined to do that, but I really want to do a lot of the strong visual effects on this scene with the white pigment ink. I think it makes it look really dramatic, so I have to retain the white of the card. Because the white of the card represents what? It represents the lighting in the piece. So this scene right here, from a compositional aspect, this is a Prussian blue right here. It gets really busy with all these trees in here, so I want things to be a little bit less busy and a little bit more, I don't know, tranquil, I guess we can say. So kind of adding these darker tones into the piece and running these colors through the trees, in the sky here. It decreases the contrast between all of the different images. So hopefully it doesn't look quite as busy. It still looks pretty busy in there with all the different forms, but when you kind of merge things together a little bit more with the use of tone or color or whatnot, both, you know, shadow and light, the images tend to merge together a little bit more, and it creates a little bit more of a visual harmony. Okay, moving on to black, using the same kind of part of the rag here. Shammy. Alright, this is black right there, so see how dark that is? And I'm kind of working that area right there. And I'll work the corners especially. And if there's a place where there's a decent amount of darkness, I'll add a little bit more of that. See, I'm not adding it like right here in the lighter areas because it's too light. I don't want this dark of a color in there. So the darker you go, you know, the less toning you're usually doing, because it tends to be a little bit more perimeter oriented with the darker tones, the darker values of the piece. And this is no different than something like portrait photography, where you know, if you're taking a photograph, or someone's had a photograph taken in a studio situation, if you look at the print, it's always kind of dark around the subject for framing purposes, composition purposes, and etc. So we're kind of framing this off. And I like to frame off quite a bit by applying a pretty decent amount of black. Unless it's a really light sunny day or something like that, with a kind of a baby blue sky or something like that. I don't make it so dark on the edges in those instances, but I'd like to do a little bit of framing, so I just make it a little bit darker on the edges. But a nighttime scene, yeah, you're afforded the ability to go fairly dark and to have this vignette really quite strong in the piece. You know, I think this black of mine is really dry. Let me re-ink that if I have my black re-inker. Here I do. It's been really super hot over this past weekend. I don't know if it dried out my pads or something like that, but yeah, that looks like a little bit better. If you have a really wet pad, kind of be careful about the rate at which you apply your inks into your scene, especially if it's one of the darker colors. Alright, so the chamois, I don't know, it works just fine. I can't remember if I've used it before. I did that household item ink applicator video, and I used a paper towel, kitchen sponge, and I think a cosmetic wedge style sponge, and I just, I don't know, demonstrated the different I don't know, whatever tools, I guess you could say, makeshift tools, and they all did very well. Some of them, the sponge, the kitchen sponge, is one that I planned on using a lot more because of the absorbency factor, and you can really get a lot of media down very quickly using the kitchen sponge. My fingers do get quite a bit inkier though. Oh, okay, see it, yeah, like that, because I'm, you know, holding on to you know, material where the ink is soaking through. If you're worried about that, you can wear gloves or something like that. You know, those plastic gloves. I might want to use kind of disposable ones because you know, my fingertips do get quite inky when doing that. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. But you know what? I think I want to go a little bit lighter. It's losing some of the vibrancy in here because where I've applied this lighter green, I can't see it now. I'm not going to apply this lighter green and having it's not going to look lighter, but I just want to get more of that warm intensity. Okay, so I need to switch from this area where I've used black, you know, to a new area here. I could go with this one, but I just know this color really well. It's a light green and it's very, very intense. Okay, let me just use it in one little area, and you can see that. You see that glow right there? That's what I kind of like. I like to use bright tones a lot. Not everywhere, but on a scene like this one, I tend to see this as... I think it looks like an emerald, this color scheme. So I want that glowing type of property of a gem in the light. So that's why I'm applying this. It's kind of warming up the scene a touch too, but it's especially creating that color glow. And I do have a video on color glows and how to achieve them. It means just dipping into the color on the color wheel that's next to the one that you've already applied. They're called analogous colors. And when you use analogous colors next to each other, and they're, in this case, right over the top of it, it creates that color glow, because there's a little bit more yellow in this green right here, of course, than just like a Christmas green or a pine green. So it doesn't, I don't know, I think that makes that look a little bit more interesting now, having that glow in there. And again, my inclination is to use a little bit more, but I really want to use some of that white pigment ink in there. Someone posted a photo of this type of scenario, but it had the light beams from the moon. I think it was the moon. It might have been the setting sun or something like that, going across the trees. And I really love doing that type of effect with pigment ink, so I thought we'd try it here. That's photographs been on my mind, and it should be easy to do in the scene like this, because we have a focal point light source in here, so I'm going to be running the lighting in here. Now, this is going to be, it's not hard, okay? The things that are lower on a composition usually represent things that are closer to us. In Western perspective, they put the things that are lower on the horizon, you know, representing something closer. Okay, so in this case, it's like close, kind of middle ground, and background. It's the same exact tree, though, so it's, you know, we're not talking about a ton of depth here. But nevertheless, that's like that. So if I have these beams kind of running through these trees, so you can do it anyway. You can have beams going over the top and saying, okay, you know, there's some light beams over the top, or in this case, I can have it coming from underneath and running across some of these trees, but do I have the beam going underneath this one, and underneath this one, and out? Or do you have it going underneath this one like that, and going over the top of this one? Well, there's no right or wrong. You can do it any way. And chances are I'll do it, you know, in multiple ways. I'll have some light beams coming in here and going behind these trees, and maybe some light beam right here will be going under the background ones and over the foreground, or the midground and foreground trees. Okay? And like with all things, when it comes to decisions in, you know, whatever, artwork, scenic stamping, anything like that, it's, when you do these things, it's not really so much a matter of making the right decision, okay? It's just one decision, and it, you know, there's no wrong way to do it. There's just multiple ways, and there's ways that, I don't, you know, they could be better than another, but it's usually not something where one decision was a bad one. You know, there's just various tiers of, you know, gosh, I was trying not to say you know so much in these videos, but there's just different things that look good. Okay. So let's do this one right here. See that beam going across right there? I have it going under a little bit through that, but it's, for the most part, it's coming from underneath that tree. I think it's a little bit too harsh there. I think I put a little bit too much pigment ink on there. I can just wipe that right off too. On glossy cardstock, it comes off very, very easily. So if I wanted to, I can take that off. But I don't think I want to. The inks will also dry darker than how they look when they're freshly applied. Okay, I'm kind of hesitating when I talk here because I'm trying to figure out, when I cover up the trees like that, I have to kind of designate where the light is going to be coming from, because it's going to be coming from underneath that one tree and underneath, over the top of another one. Okay, now when you're applying this ink here, kind of vary your application of it, how thick you're applying it. Okay, I think that makes things look a little bit more realistic too. Okay, so I've kind of what I call curtaining it. I have it a little bit thicker on the top of that beam, and then as I go down, there's less of it. Okay, now you can do all kinds of things too. Let's say one beam just gets a little bit too harsh. I mean, you could take a, like a fresh cotton ball or paper towel or something like that and just kind of dabble that along. And what you'll be doing is you'll be removing some of that ink. Provided it wasn't on there so thick that it's, smearing it around or something like that, okay? So it's a very forgiving process. I know you don't want to think so. Some people that think, oh my God, you make it look so easy. I always say this, work in easy methodology, and then you'll have an easy technique. If you work in kind of more precarious types of, methodologies, then it'll become more precarious. So what I mean by this, that when it comes to this, is you just apply a very thin layer of it at first. Okay, see that beam right here? It's just a very light version of it right here. Okay, so that's all. I'm not trying to get those beams in there in one tap, across the surface. It's like several taps, and it just gets a little bit. The beam gets a little bit more distinct with each tap. So you're applying just very little at any given time. That goes the same thing with when I was doing the colored ink applications. I'm just applying one color that's a little bit darker than the previous one. Okay. And I'm using this moon right here. And it's kind of roughly the center of the moon, I guess. I really wasn't thinking about it too much, but I think that's probably what I'm doing. I was just kind of aiming it anywhere. I should aim it really towards the center of the moon, but we'll start doing that now. Okay, now one of the things I'm doing too is I'm starting at the top and I'm applying a little bit more ink closer to the light source, right? Does that make sense? A little bit lighter towards the light. And then as I use this ink, and as I travel away from it, I'm applying less, okay? So by the very nature of it, when I apply new ink on here, it's going to be the wettest, so you apply that in the wetter areas, okay? And then as you travel down with each tapping, there's less ink on this, so it becomes a lighter application of it, okay? Let's have a look here. Okay. Now, see, this beam's here started on this tree down here. I didn't start it all the way up here, so you can kind of do that too. You can have beams emanating from different areas within there. And I don't know where I'm going to do them most of the time. As I work from one beam over to the next one, sometimes I take a look at and see where I am, and oftentimes it's revealed to me where I should put the next beam, where I can't really do that in the beginning of the process because it's hard to tell what the piece is looking like at that time. Okay, so I went kind of narrow on this one because I thought these ones looked thicker. I think maybe over here, but do it really lightly because it's really kind of dark over here, so maybe I'll put, just a little hint of a beam, maybe. Maybe I'll make it a little bit wider. And I'll just have it really peter out. It's kind of hard to tell how much you're applying sometimes. Okay, see that one right there? Oh, it's a little bit less, it's a little bit more translucent than this one over here. This one's a little bit more opaque. Okay, let's go with I'm thinking about a nice narrow one over here. I have a little peekaboo kind of in the tree there. I know you can't see it, but I see these cloud templates out there which look really cool, but the last thing I really want to see from some producer is the, you know, the light beam template, you know what I mean? Where it's just these kind of narrow kind of beams cut out into plastic, you know. This works pretty good, you know. You can alter it wherever you want it to go, and you need something really thin too. You don't want to go through some kind of thick plastic. But I don't know. It kind of cracks me up sometime when I see some of those products out there that kind of mimic things that we have around the house that work much more effectively, in my opinion. Okay, a little bit of a dark, brighter beam right there. Okay, now this, as is, kind of looks a little bit weird because we need to apply the same type of texture, I'm talking about the white ink, into other areas of the piece to make it make sense. You wouldn't have just these beams looking like this, okay? They're a little bit, I don't know, too obvious, okay? All right, so I think that's enough of the beams right there. What do you think? Okay, so what I'm talking about this is those beams represent kind of the light going through the atmosphere or whatever here, and there's suspended particles in the air, you know, that are reflecting that light, okay? So we need to add some more of this haze in there to say that there's this mist or whatever within this space, okay? So now this is where the retention of those lighter areas within those trees comes into play, okay? We're using the same cotton ball here. I don't think I've said it in this video today, but try to use 100% cotton. The acrylic cotton balls, they just don't work really well. They don't hold the ink very nicely like true cotton. And I've tried that too with the cotton swabs when I use like a cotton swab. Those acrylic ones are just, I don't know, for me, in terms of this usage, of going for something really soft and well, yeah, soft texture. The ink just applies so much more gracefully. Okay, now I hope you can see what I'm doing in here. Do you see how the base of the trees are now diffused like that? They're diffused in the same type of light that those beams are supposedly being developed from, okay? So we're bringing a little bit more continuity into the lighting scheme especially by introducing this light, you know, which is white on dark here, into the piece in general. Okay, so I'm adding it where light meets dark, so I'm tapping this into those areas where I've retained the white of the paper, okay, or a little bit of it. I mean, there's a little bit of ink on some of that, you know, because I didn't want it so stark white. But for the most part, it is largely, you know, not uncolored. Okay, so see those trees right now? How illuminated they are. See that? And we have the moon kind of shining over the top of those trees. Let's take a look at this right here. Let's add this tone right over the top of it, so it looks like those trees are really capturing that light. White pigment ink, I'll tell you. And doing this type of effect like this, you can really... This right here can make all of your stamps look different. It's like expanding their their range. It's like, it's almost like they're actors in a play or something like that, and they can play this kind of one note type of thing, right? But it's with this white pigment ink right here, it's you can change their entire spirit, where they're the same thing, but they just look different. And when it comes to lighting, I mean, these trees in here, they were all the same tree, just stamped 3 times. But they look different to me based on their location within this piece, and how, let's say, how much of this pigment ink I've applied on them, the amount of pigment ink I've applied in certain areas of them. And plus, doing this type of thing, look at the continuity that we're creating overall with this pigment ink right here. So you create, I don't know, maybe it's I don't know what it would, how I would describe it. When you're applying color into these pieces, there's a certain type of thing that we are creating, but then going back in and adding some of this additional texturing, lighting, and I guess it's the reverse of toning or something like that, but it just, I don't know, it expands just the visual range, and by doing so, the mood of your piece. And it's really in this simple process right here. Now, normally I'd say, kind of oscillate things. Don't put it everywhere. A lot of times people just go like this with it, okay? But it's mostly where light meets dark, okay? You can see I don't go into these areas as much. On this one I'm using a lot more than I usually do, because I'm thinking, okay, that looks really good. I'm going to add more. I think that is enough right there, though. I've added a ton. But if you want to go a little bit more detailed in some areas, it's hard to achieve true opacity with this, so some areas just are not going to get any lighter. It's because as I'm applying this, well, those ones are getting a little bit lighter, but as I apply this, this color is kind of built up, especially on this glossy cardstock. On matte cardstock, the application is a little bit more secured and permanent because it's sticking on there a little bit more. And whatever that binder is they use in pigment inks, it soaks into the paper a little bit more. More complete, I don't know, whatever. But these will dry, though, like I said, and it'll have a different spirit than what it looks like right now. But so you kind of have to tone a little bit over what you think is the ideal amount. I always mention that in the videos too. But this kind of represents a little bit of a mist within the bowl of the train on the lower line areas. And that's what I'm doing there. So again, we go back to that whole idea of that oscillation of light and dark. It's much more apparent now, wouldn't you say? In terms of the general areas, we're going dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, and so on and so forth. But look at what we're doing here, too, with these beams right here. I mean, it's really distinct here. We're talking about that light beam, dark, light, dark, light, dark. You know what I mean? So you're doing it, both horizontally and vertically here. And these ones right here are going back in perspective, but they are still going up and down. Okay, so that is that with the pigment ink. Remember, this is going to dry differently, so the beams won't be quite as distinct. They lose their opacity or their strength, and they kind of mellow out sometimes for the best. Sometimes I lose them too much, and I'll go ahead and, when this is dry, I'll put another layer right over the top of, the same beams. Or on some beams, I'll kind of make them a little bit stronger, maybe on one side of the beam, by adding a little bit more pigment ink on the top. Yeah, I'll do little tweaks like that. Not all the time. you know, because I'm moved on to my next scene or whatever. But I do that sometimes, especially if it's on a really large piece, like an 8.5 by 11, where you've really made a, you know, quite an investment in time working with it, and beams are really something fairly significant in terms of the overall spirit of the piece. So I will take my time, and sometimes you can spray this too with a spray fixative or a acrylic spray, and you can go and apply more of that pigment ink right over the top of the acrylic spray too. And that, but I would recommend you sealing it again after doing that, so you can do multiple coats of your pigment ink as well. Okay, this is white acrylic paint pen. I'm going in, kind of adding a little bit more of a kind of a transition between the top of the hill and that little bowl down below. So you want to kind of add this where the top surfaces of things are, where maybe light is hitting them the strongest. You see this moon right here? The clouds. Most of the things right down here are top lit because the light is coming from above. Okay? Like, say, for these trees right here, I'll put a few highlights on the tops of these trees, right? Top of this little hill right here. Top of the tree. Top of the tree. Okay, but the clouds over the top of the moon, I'll bottom light those ones, okay? Because the clouds are being bottom lit. Most everything else in the scene is being top lit. But you do have this little area up here on the Eerie Moon where the clouds are being illuminated from below. Okay, so I'll show you what that means, like that. So it's right along here and here. And then you kind of taper it out. What I mean by that is you put a few more closer to the light, and then you kind of spread your dots out the farther you get from that light source. Okay. You can do little things like, even on these tree trunks here, the side of the trunk facing the light, you can put a few little highlights if you want to. If you can't tell where, if the trunk is like immediately below the tree trunk where it's not, you know, full right or left or something like that, then put it at wherever. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Alright, so let's see if we can see these little highlights in here. Alright. Trying to think if there's anything else in here that I want to do, but I think that's about it. I don't know, we could do birds or something like that in the sky. I don't think I'm going to do that, though. I think that makes a pretty full statement, and I don't know, it gets what I wanted to get done in terms of these beams coming through the trees, like that. So you have some beams coming from underneath some trees. Some of the beams are going underneath some trees and over the top of others, based on the relative location of the trees. On these ones right here, they're all really close to us, and I don't know, maybe farther down the hill. Maybe, let's say this is a hill and this is a slope, so these ones are at the top of the slope. So these ones are so far down, the beams are going over the top of all these ones. Over the top of most of these ones, but sometimes underneath, okay? Because it's still kind of high up on the ridge or whatever, slope. But, so that's little things you can play around with. But, I don't know. If you were to put something, like if that beam wasn't over the top of that one, it came underneath it, it's not wrong. It's just a different choice there. And I think they would be equally as nice. Okay, so anyways, hope you enjoyed it. Green, eat your green beams. Yeah, I'm not going to name it that, but anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section.